Hello and welcome to the Feck It Fun, Fabulous and Free Eating Disorder Recovery podcast. I'm Helly and I'm here to provide regular bursts of information and inspiration, some neuroscience applicable to eating disorder recovery, perhaps a few rants, but otherwise lots of positivity with a bit of a feck it attitude, some fun and a sprinkling of fabulousness to help everyone find freedom in recovery. Hi there, and welcome to this episode of the Feck It Fun, Fabulous and Free Eating Disorder Recovery podcast. I hope everybody is okay today and you've started the day with some serious eating disorder bashing going on in your life, because that's the most important thing, is that if you can start the day with some serious bashing, then you push your brain out of those eating disorder networks from the beginning of the day, and then it can be easier to stay out of the eating disorder behaviours as the day progresses if you then keep bashing and keep your brain from jumping back into those eating disorder networks. So start your day positively with some big eats. Shake everything up, as I like to say. Have a massive breakfast of something that you've never had before or not for a very long time, and break all those restrictive habits, all those little rituals and patterns that keep you so stuck and ingrained in the eating disorder. And then just keep going through the day like that. And if you haven't started the day like that yet, start it now. Even if it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon now, just go for it and show the eating disorder that you're in control now, not it. So I hope you are okay. I hope you're doing brilliantly. If you're not, that's okay. But if you're not, take a step back and work out what it is that's stopping you at the moment from making more progress. What is it that's blocking you? What do you need to change in order to be able to make more significant changes in overcoming the eating disorder? What extra support might you need? What or who could help you with that? Don't sit there and stay stuck and feel frustrated. Sometimes it takes problem solving, it takes working out what's not going right and why it's not going right, and then doing something about that. As they say, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. And that's the same with eating disorder recovery. Sometimes you need to change what you're doing and how you're doing it. And you need to shake it all up. You need to really focus on new things, new goals, a fresh approach perhaps. But today's episode is about what factors make overcoming an eating disorder as hard as it is. And I'm going to do a series of episodes on this in the coming weeks about so many of the different factors that can make overcoming an eating disorder so hard. But today's episode is about the return of emotions and how the emotions that return as you're overcoming the eating disorder can then actually make ongoing progress that much harder to go through and to continue with. I don't need to tell you that overcoming a restrictive eating disorder is incredibly hard. And I often say that it's likely the hardest thing you will do in your lifetime. And I say that because it's true. It's so incredibly difficult to overcome an eating disorder. And a significant factor in making an eating disorder so hard to overcome is the inevitable return of emotions that can just hit you out of nowhere during the recovery process. And for many, that often very rapid return of very strong emotions can be debilitating when they first kick in. But let's face it, eating disorders don't have such low recovery rates because you just choose to start eating normally one day, gain a bit of weight, and job done. Eating disorders have low recovery rates because there are powerful brain-based factors at play, making the necessary changes that to the outside world might seem simple, feel complicated, emotional, and impossible to tolerate to the person trying to navigate through it. Now, in the past, many experts, and I put experts in inverted commas there, believed that an eating disorder was caused by past trauma or poor parenting. I like to think that both those theories have been discredited enough by now, and they're not views that remain widespread. But despite the fact that eating disorders don't initially develop purely as a means to manage hard emotions, stress, or trauma, their addictive nature and the surge of positive feeling that pursuing energy deficit through an eating disorder will create can very quickly change that. So the pursuit of energy deficit with an eating disorder, which is achieved by restrictive eating and compulsive compensatory behaviours, enables you to feel calm, better able to function, and at least at the beginning of the eating disorder, it can make you really feel quite good in yourself. And that effect ensures that rapidly after onset, the eating disorder becomes the most powerful way you will ever have to numb painful emotions, feel better, and manage stress in your life. And as with other addictions, an eating disorder can quickly consume you, shrinking your ability to experience a wider life and removing your experience of either good or bad emotions beyond a very basic level. And that's caused by a brain whose primary focus is the pursuit of energy deficit and its numbing effects, a pursuit that's happening at a deep and subconscious level. It's also the case that an energy-deprived brain, which is an inevitable consequence of a restrictive eating disorder, has a reduced ability to find joy in things that were once pleasurable. And this natural physiological and psychological reaction to hunger and starvation is something that I talked a lot about in the episodes I made about the Minnesota starvation experiment and the findings from that really showed the scientists and even health professionals today what effect starvation and being in a state of energy deficit will have on a person, on their psychology, on their biology, and in so many different ways. The longer that you have an eating disorder, the more likely it is that you will lose your ability to associate with true emotions. And that means you lose connection to yourself and your ability to live authentically. When you're unable to recognize what you feel, it's hard to understand what your needs are beyond the inner compulsion to pursue energy deficit and to build a life around that addictive drive. And of course, many people live within an eating disordered brain for years, sometimes even decades. So it's been years or decades since they experienced real emotions, and that might be true for you as well. And that's something that can be hard to realize and accept. When being numb has been your norm for years, it's hard to remember or understand that you're not experiencing emotions in the way that other people do, because what's normal is quickly forgotten. And that makes resurfacing emotions during the recovery process even more alarming when actually you believe you have been experiencing emotions in quite a normal way up to now. But when you do abstain from the compulsive behaviours in the process of overcoming the eating disorder, your true emotions will begin to re-emerge, and they can be intense. And that's a frightening and overwhelming time, and can become an obstacle in feeling able to push forwards when these powerful emotions automatically then create stronger urges to return to the eating disordered behaviours. And of course, it's not just negative emotions that resurface. Positive ones do as well, which can be incredible as you feel real joy or genuine laughter again. You're likely to feel positively relieved that you're no longer living a life of entrapment in an eating disorder and perceive colour returning to your world in all kinds of small ways and in all kinds of amazing ways. But even the return of positive emotions can feel like a double-edged sword, as it can be tinged with intense sadness then, that you lost this ability to experience real pleasure for so long. And alongside that, experiencing joy again, experiencing real positive emotions in your life again, can be coupled with vulnerability and fears. Because what if all these good changes are snatched away from you again? That can be quite scary to think all these good things I'm rediscovering in my life could so quickly be lost again if the eating disorder decides to grab it and snatch it away from me again. And the ability to feel even more intense love and affection for friends and family, for your partner, also becomes stronger as your emotions reawaken. Now, of course, the love was always there, but an eating disorder can blunt the intensity of it. And the return of the strength of emotional feeling you have towards others can also be frightening, because love makes us vulnerable, even though it's also amazing and powerful. And when emotions strengthen towards others in your life, so too can feelings of pain and guilt around the impact that the eating disorder had, not just on your life, but the lives of those who love you too. When you were consumed with the eating disorder, it was very likely more difficult to notice or do anything about the impact that the eating disorder had on those around you. And the harsh reality often only hits as you overcome the eating disorder and the narrowed focus it created begins to widen again. And that can create really challenging emotions to sit through, to tolerate, to sit through that pain and that often those feelings of guilt, even though perhaps the guilt isn't warranted, it's still hard to sit through that. So many people do experience feelings of guilt and shame in relation to the impact the eating disorder has had on loved ones and on themselves. And shame is an incredibly painful emotion and hard to tolerate. They say that shame is perhaps one of the hardest and most painful emotions there is. Experiencing it can lead to powerful urges to re-engage in old behaviours for their numbing effects. And that's where you need to be really self-aware and really hold on to your insight of what's happening during the recovery process. If you start to notice stronger emotions, but then notice that you're starting to be pulled back into eating less, into moving more, into worsening body image thoughts, whatever it is, try and link up the two. Try and associate, okay, I'm feeling really fat and gross in myself today, and I'm having really strong urges to go running. But that's likely because I've had these intense emotions that feel like a sense of grief over the life I lost because of the eating disorder for so many years. And actually, I'm just going to sit through that grief. I'm going to process those emotions, and I'm going to keep eating, and I'm not going to go running, and I'm not going to react to the fact that my body image feels like crap at the moment. It is really hard though, and that's where having someone to talk through what you're going through, having people to support you, is also going to be really important. The other thing that can come back as you go through the recovery process is boredom. Boredom, feeling low and despondent or flat, are also really common in the recovery process. Because your go-to for a sense of distraction and pleasure, or just a way to keep busy, has been the eating disorder for a long time, and other pursuits that people find pleasurable will have lost the same appeal to you. So when you make yourself stop the old habitual pleasure-seeking methods, you'll probably feel quite lost and flat because your brain isn't yet capable of being able to enjoy significant pleasure in what might be considered much simpler ways. And that's going to occur as you are going through the dopamine deficit state, and your natural dopamine levels are taking time to return to a natural and more stable baseline. And you'll understand a bit more about what I mean by that if you go back and listen to my episodes about dopamine and about the dopamine seesaw effect that happens in the brain and the dopamine deficit that will occur in someone with an eating disorder or any addiction. So through recovery, learning to tolerate boredom and just be in your own skin is important, without using the eating disorder to numb or distract. It's also important to let yourself feel the hunger signals your brain and body are sending in times of boredom, as that's when they can be most striking. And although the strength of those hunger signals can be frightening, that hunger is there for a reason, and you need to hear it. You need to respond to it. And finally, it's not uncommon for people to become very depressed at various stages of the process to overcome an eating disorder. And in large part, that can be due to the dopamine deficit state that the addictive nature of the eating disorder created. So time is needed to allow dopamine levels to naturally return to a level balance, because that's when you start to feel better again. But of course, there are also other reasons that people can go through episodes of depression in the process of recovery. And if you feel your mood is reducing significantly and you need professional help for it, then please seek that input from the right people. But what purpose then do emotions actually serve? Well, without getting into the deep science of feelings and emotions, it's important to acknowledge that emotions and feelings do serve a purpose. Humans don't have the capacity for emotions without good reason. As many people who have lived in the numb world of an eating disorder can testify to, it's very hard to live a truly full and meaningful life without the experience of emotions, both good and bad. But what purpose then are they serving us? Well, most people don't realise that emotions occur before you're even consciously aware of them. Because emotions are essentially a physical state change. So it's a physical state change within our body that the brain then interprets using its best guess as to what caused that change. And then it turns it into a feeling. And that's the point at which your brain's interpretation of the change in physical state enters your conscious awareness. So in this way, emotions can take over our thoughts and trigger immediate responses. And that's actually often necessary for survival. For example, emotions can serve the purpose of ensuring we're able to make quick decisions and deter from danger. So if you see a car heading towards you at high speed, fear is an appropriate emotion and serves the purpose of making you rapidly move out of the way. And some other examples of emotions can include a prompt to communicate with others. So emotions can guide you to seek connection and support from other people. They can be an aid to help us understand others, a guide to show us what's safe and good for us, a means to instruct us, and a means of allowing us to function on a social level and live among others, which is also, of course, so important for survival. And when you can feel your emotions and recognise them, it can help you to identify what you need to survive and to live a wider life. So, for example, if you're feeling lonely, you might seek out someone for a hug or find ways to connect with other people. If you're feeling overwhelmed, you might seek out quiet time to be by yourself. If you're frustrated and angry that your boss is constantly belittling you, you might seek a new job. If you feel guilt for forgetting your friend's birthday, you might call them to apologise and arrange a date to get together. If you're feeling sadness, you might recognise what has caused this and acknowledge that something important to you is missing, allowing yourself time to cry. And when you feel joyful that you have conquered that large pizza and the ice cream that the eating disorder stopped you from enjoying for so long, you might do a victory dance and share your win with someone who gets it. So emotions are important. They are a valuable part of being human, and without them, life becomes suboptimal and we live a very narrow life. But of course, emotions aren't easy to experience. Many people use all kinds of measures to avoid feeling emotions, And eating disorders are one powerful method. But people without eating disorders might use alcohol, gambling, shopping, excessive social media use, or other numbing habits. And when your emotions return as you overcome the eating disorder, which they will and they need to, it will be crucial to find ways to manage them. You're going to get strong urges to resort to the old, effective eating disordered habits and block the emotions as they surface. So be prepared for that. Seek support, use a coach, use people who love you, and develop a range of healthy skills in emotion regulation. Feel the painful emotions and let them guide you by recognizing what they're trying to tell you. Then allow yourself to wallow in the positive emotions, because after living in an eating disorder, you deserve to experience all the joy that life can now bring. The return of emotions in overcoming an eating disorder can be a critical time period in the process. It's a time you're much more vulnerable, making the eating disorder urges in the shape of thoughts, anxiety, overwhelm, and automatically finding yourself going back to old ways, more intense and frequent. So be prepared for this time and let yourself experience and process feelings again. And if you do find that you start to experience difficult trauma responses or feel you're becoming a threat to yourself or unsafe, then you must seek professional support to help you while you go through this critical and challenging time safely. So in future episodes, I'm going to cover a few more of the factors that make overcoming an eating disorder so hard, so that you can be aware of them and navigate them more effectively. But if you want to read about them before then it's all in my first book, which is called Addicted to Energy Deficit, a neuroscience-based guide to restrictive eating disorders, and you can find that on most online book retailers around the world. So pick up a copy because it supports me as well in the work that I do. There's also my second book, which you might or might not be aware of, called Aiming for Overshoot, and that's more of a handbook in practical ways to manage the process of overcoming the eating disorder. But right now, my dear listener, you know what to do. You know it's hard, but you know that nothing worth doing in life comes easy, as they say. I wish it was easy for you, though. I wish it was so much easier than it is. But the harsh reality is that it isn't that easy. But you have to do it anyway if you want to find your life and just what it can be without an eating disorder in it. So keep it simple. Abstain from restriction, which means eating all the foods that you know you want to eat and that you're holding yourself back from allowing yourself to eat at the moment. It means resting like a sloth and being okay about doing that because it is the right thing to do right now. It means not purging, not chewing and spitting, not compulsively keeping busy and finding other ways to avoid sitting through your own emotions and feelings and having to sit and tolerate being in your own skin. It means getting bored. It means letting yourself cry when you need to just cry. It means punching a pillow when you need to punch something. And it just means letting yourself be human again and experience all the messiness of being a real human being and all that entails. So go and be fabulous, but go and be a messy and fabulous human being and find your superpowers in overcoming the eating disorder and bash that eating disorder, eliminate it from your life. You are fabulous. I'm Helly. You'll find me on hellybarnes.com. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Feck It Fun, Fabulous and Free Eating Disorder Recovery podcast. Don't forget, eating disorder recovery doesn't have to be boring and doesn't have to be serious. Now go and grab yourself some food and have a fabulous rest of the day.